Lena Parker's apartment had grown too quiet lately. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound that kept her company most mornings. She sat at the edge of her kitchen table, staring at the crooked cabinet door that refused to close no matter how many times she tried. It wasn't a big problem, but somehow it bothered her more than it should. Maybe because it reminded her of everything else in her life that had stopped fitting right. Her marriage had ended months ago, her friends had drifted away, and her home, once filled with laughter, now felt like a waiting room. Between who she used to be and who she didn't know how to become, that morning, she finally decided to fix one small thing. She called a local handyman. The voice on the phone had been calm, low, and professional. "I'll be there in the morning, ma'am," he had said. She didn't think much of it, just another stranger coming to fix something broken. But when the knock came at her door, something about it made her heart skip. Lena opened the door and found a man standing there, tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold a quiet depth. He wasn't young, not old either, somewhere in between. He wore a gray shirt rolled up at the sleeves, a tool bag over one shoulder, and a kind expression that immediately softened the air around him. "Morning," he said politely. "I'm Evan Cole. You called about a cabinet." She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "Yes, it's in the kitchen. It's stubborn." He smiled lightly. "Aren't they all?" She didn't laugh, but the corner of her lips curved. It had been a while since someone's tone made her feel lighter, even for a second. He walked in, setting down his tools, and began inspecting the cabinet as if it were the most important task in the world. Lena stood nearby, unsure if she should stay or give him space. Evan worked with steady hands. The sound of his screwdriver turning filled the quiet kitchen. It was simple work, yet the moment felt oddly charged, like the air held a quiet hum. Lena found herself watching him longer than she meant to. There was something peaceful about the way he moved, focused, patient, unhurried. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice carried a calm warmth that filled the silence without trying. "Looks like the hinge is loose," he said, glancing up at her. "Nothing serious. I'll tighten it and add a new screw." "Thank you," she said softly. "It's been bothering me for weeks." He nodded, a small smile tugging at his mouth. Sometimes it's the small things that get under your skin. The words lingered longer than they should have. She turned away, pretending to busy herself with making coffee. The smell of it filled the kitchen, comforting in a familiar way. She poured 2 cups before realizing she didn't know if he even wanted one. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked hesitantly. He looked up, surprised. "That would be great. Thank you." She handed him the mug, and for a second their fingers brushed. It was brief, but the touch felt real in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She tried to shake off the strange warmth that spread through her chest. He took a sip, nodding with quiet appreciation. "You make it strong." "I guess I needed to wake up," she replied, smiling faintly. He smiled too. It wasn't just polite. It was genuine, soft around the edges. Like someone who didn't smile often but meant it when he did. For a few minutes, they didn't speak. He focused on the cabinet. She stood by the counter pretending to check her phone. But their silence wasn't awkward debt, was something else. It felt like peace after a long noise. As he worked, Lena noticed a small scar along his wrist, and before she could stop herself, she asked, "Have you been doing this long?" "About 12 years, he said without looking up. "Started after I moved here from Vermont." "Do you like it?" He paused, tightening a screw, then said, "It's honest work. Things break, I fix them. Simple. I guess I like that part." Lena nodded. It must be nice to fix things that can be fixed. He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something she couldn't name. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is." For a moment, she forgot to breathe. There was something about that look, that tone. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it reached a place inside her that had been untouched for too long. When he finished, he stood and tested the cabinet door. It closed perfectly this time, smooth and quiet. He smiled with a small sense of pride. "They're good as new." Lena laughed softly. "You make it look easy." "Most things are," he said, "once you know where the real problem is." That line stayed in her mind even after he wiped his hands and started packing up his tools. She wanted to say something to keep him there just a little longer, but couldn't think of a reason that didn't sound strange. As he headed toward the door, he turned back and said, "If it acts up again, just give me a call." "I will," she replied, though she knew she wouldn't need to. The cabinet was fine now. It was something else that felt unsteady after he left. The apartment grew quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. There was warmth in it now, a faint echo of the calm he'd brought with him. Lena found herself standing in front of the cabinet, opening and closing it again, just to hear the smooth sound it made. It wasn't just the cabinet that felt fixed. It was her. Even if just a little. Later that evening, she sat on the couch with her cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. She thought about the way Evan's eyes had softened when he spoke. The quiet steadiness in his movements, the way he seemed to understand more than his words said. She told herself it was nothing, that it was just a friendly exchange, that she was imagining the connection. But deep down, she knew better. For the first time in a long while, she felt something shift inside her. Not a spark. It's just a quiet awareness that maybe not all broken things stayed that way. Maybe some people come into your life not to stay forever, but just long enough to remind you that healing is possible. As the city lights glowed outside her window, Lena leaned back and let herself smile. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close, something beginning. And though she didn't know it yet, that quiet man who came to fix her cabinet would soon return. Not because the wood was broken, but because something else was on, maybe. Just maybe they'd both find the courage to mend it. The next morning, Lena found herself glancing at the cabinet more than once. It closed perfectly, just like Evan had promised. There was nothing left to fix, yet every time she walked into the kitchen, she caught herself remembering his calm voice, the steady way he spoke, and the small, genuine smile that had felt too rare and too kind to forget. She didn't know why he'd stayed in her mind, but he did. Maybe because he'd treated her home and her with quiet care. No judgment, no rush. By noon, the sound of rain began to fall against her windows, soft but steady. Lena made coffee and sat by the table again, listening to the hum of the city outside. Everything felt the same as yesterday, yet somehow different. She told herself it was silly. He was just a handyman, a stranger who came to fix a door hinge, but there was something in the way. He looked at her that made her feel like a person again, not just someone surviving her days. Around 3 in the afternoon, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, just checking in. How's the cabinet holding up? She smiled without meaning to. Her reply came fast. Still working perfectly. You did a great job. A minute later, another message appeared. Good to hear. Some cabinets have a mind of their own. Glad this one's behaving. Lena laughed quietly. It was simple, ordinary small talk, yet it felt like warmth filling a space she hadn't noticed was empty. She typed back, "Wouldn't want to call you again so soon." Then she hesitated. Was that too forward? But before she could overthink it, another message appeared. "You could call anyway. I make good conversation." That made her heart skip. She put her phone down, shaking her head with a small smile. But her chest felt lighter than it had in months. The next day, she decided to bake. It was something she used to love before her life became quiet and predictable. The smell of cinnamon filled her small apartment, and the scent reminded her of better days. She was just pulling the tray from the oven when another knock sounded at the door. Her heart jumped. She opened it, and there he was again, Evan, standing in the doorway with that same calm smile. "Afternoon," he said, holding up his tool bag. "Just thought I'd check if everything's still fine." She blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to come all the way here for that," he shrugged. "Sometimes I like to make sure things stay fixed." She stepped aside, smiling. "Come in then. The cabinet's still perfect." He chuckled softly. "Then I guess I came for coffee instead." The words made her laugh, for a real one this time, not the kind she forced for others. "Lucky for you, I just made some." They sat across from each other again at the same table as before. The rain had stopped and sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. For a while they talked about simple things, the city, the weather, his work. He told her about Vermont, how he missed the open fields and the quiet roads. He spoke about his small workshop, how fixing things helped him feel useful. There was something soothing in his honesty. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just real. When she asked how long he'd lived here, his tone shifted slightly. "About 2 years," he said, eyes dropping to his cup. "My wife passed away before I moved. Needed a change of scenery." Lena's heart tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "Thank you. It gets easier. You just learn to carry it differently." She looked down, her own memories rising. "I didn't lose mine that way," she said quietly. "He just stopped being around. We lived in the same house, but it felt like living with silence. One day I realized I was more lonely with him there than without him." Evan looked at her, really looked. His eyes softened, and for a long moment he didn't speak. "I get that," he finally said. "Sometimes absence starts long before someone leaves." That one sentence made something stir deep inside her. He wasn't just being kind, he understood. He knew the quiet kind of heartbreak, the kind that didn't scream but still left scars. They talked for nearly an hour, their conversation flowing easily, like two people who had known each other much longer than they had. There were small smiles, soft pauses, shared silences that didn't feel awkward. When the coffee grew cold, Lena stood to refill their cups, but her hands trembled slightly. She wasn't nervous, just aware. Aware of him sitting there, of the space between them that didn't feel like distance. Evan leaned back in his chair, watching her with a gentle expression. "You know," he said, "you should smile more. You look different when you do." She turned toward him, half embarrassed. "Different how?" "Like someone remembering how." The words hit her harder than she expected. She looked away quickly, blinking against the sudden warmth behind her eyes. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time, without agenda, without pity, just truth. When she sat back down, she tried to keep the conversation light. But something had shifted. Every glance, every small smile carried a weight neither of them named. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something that made her heart remember how to feel again. The clock ticked softly, unnoticed, as the afternoon light faded into a soft orange. She hadn't realized how much time had passed until he stood up and reached for his jacket. "I should get going," he said. "Didn't mean to take up your whole afternoon." "You didn't," she replied quickly. "It was nice talking." He smiled, warm and quiet. "Yeah, it was." As he gathered his tools, Lena followed him to the door. For a second, neither of them moved. It felt like the moment was holding its breath. "Well," he said finally, adjusting the strap on his bag, "if the cabinet ever gives you trouble again, I know who to call," she finished for him. He smiled a little wider this time. "Good." Then he stepped out into the fading sunlight, his figure slowly disappearing down the hallway. The moment he was gone, the apartment fell silent again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt alive, like the walls had absorbed every word they'd shared. Lena stood by the door for a long time, her hand resting on the knob, heart steady but full. She didn't understand what was happening, only that something had changed. The world didn't look different, but it felt different. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing his voice in her head, the calm tone, the warmth behind his quiet words. She remembered the way he had looked at her, not with pity or desire, but with understanding, for the first time in years. She felt seen, not as a woman who had been left behind, but as someone still here, still capable of connection, and though she didn't know if he'd ever come back, she hoped he would. Not because the cabinet might break again, but because something inside her had started to heal, and she wasn't ready to let that feeling fade. 3 days passed, and the silence in Lena's apartment started to feel heavier again. She tried to keep busy, cleaned the kitchen, organized her books, even baked muffins she didn't really want to eat. But no matter what she did, her thoughts kept drifting back to that quiet afternoon with Evan. She could still hear his voice, calm and low, and see the small smile that had softened his face. It had been such an ordinary meeting, and yet it left something behind, something she couldn't quite explain by the fourth day. She found herself hoping her phone would buzz again with one of his short, thoughtful messages. It didn't. The silence made her restless. She almost called him just to ask if he was busy with work, but she stopped herself. It wasn't like her to reach out first, and besides, what reason could she give? The cabinet was perfectly fine. Still, a small part of her wished something would happen, something that would bring him back to her door. That wish came true sooner than she expected. Late one afternoon, there was a soft knock on the door. She froze for a second, her heart suddenly racing. When she opened it, Evan stood there again, same gray shirt, same tool bag slung over his shoulder. But this time his smile was lighter, easier. "Afternoon," he said. "Just wanted to check if the cabinet's still doing okay." Lena blinked in surprise, trying not to laugh. "You really take your job seriously?" he grinned. "Let's just say I like to make sure my work lasts." She stepped aside, motioning him in. "Come in then. Though I think you already know it's still perfect." "That's good," he said, walking into the kitchen. "But sometimes things look fine until you take a closer look." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. He wasn't just talking about wood and screws. Evan set his tools down but didn't open the cabinet. Instead, he leaned against the counter, looking around like he was taking in the space, the plants by the window. The coffee mugs neatly arranged, the sunlight pooling on the floor. "You've made this place feel warm," he said. Lena shrugged. "I try. It's not much, but it's home." He nodded, his eyes soft. "It feels like one." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavier, but not uncomfortable. She could hear the faint sound of traffic outside, the ticking clock, her own heartbeat. Then Evan broke the silence with a small laugh. "All right, maybe I didn't come here just for the cabinet." Lena smiled knowingly. "I figured." He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Honestly, I just wanted to see how you were doing. You seemed like you had a lot on your mind the other day." Her voice softened. "And you thought you'd check on me like you'd check on your repairs?" He smiled back, a little shy this time. "Something like that?" She looked at him for a long second. He wasn't trying to charm her. There was no pretense in him, no rush. Just honesty. And that, more than anything, drew her in. They ended up sitting at the kitchen table again. 2 cups of coffee between them, though neither touched theirs for a while. The conversation started slow. About harmless things, the weather, his work, her small art hobby, but soon it deepened, naturally, like a river finding its path. Evan told her about the small town he grew up in, about fishing with his dad and fixing old bikes as a teenager. He talked about how he'd fallen in love with fixing things because it gave him a sense of control. Because no matter how broken something looked, with patience it could be made whole again. Then he went quiet for a moment. His eyes lowered and his tone changed when he spoke again. "After my wife passed, I stopped fixing anything for a while. I didn't see the point." Lena didn't speak. She just listened. She could hear the weight in his voice, the kind that comes from pain that's been carried too long. But eventually, continued. "I realized that avoiding the broken things didn't stop them from being broken. I had to start somewhere. So I started fixing what I could. It helped." Lena's eyes softened. "That's brave, Evan. Most people just learn to live around the cracks." He looked at her, then really looked. "You didn't," he said quietly. She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "You called for help," he said. "Most people wouldn't. You wanted to fix something, even if it was just a cabinet. That takes courage, too." Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever said something like that to her before. She didn't know how to respond, so she smiled instead, small, real, grateful. The air between them changed again, soft, almost fragile. They both felt it, though neither said it aloud, as the afternoon light shifted to golden. They moved to the living room, talking more easily now. She showed him an old painting she'd been working on, half finished and tucked behind a chair. It was of a quiet landscape, lonely trees against a fading sky. Evan stared at it for a long time. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's not done." She replied quickly. He looked at her and said, "Maybe that's what makes it beautiful." The words hung in the air, gentle but powerful. Lena's heart ached in the best possible way. They fell into an easy rhythm, short talks, quiet pauses, small smiles that said more than words could. At one point, he helped her reach a box from a high shelf, and their hands brushed again. It was an innocent touch, but the air shifted instantly. Neither of them moved right away. When their eyes met, it felt like something inside both of them broke open a little more. Neither spoke of it, though. They didn't need to. As the sun dipped lower, Evan finally said, "I should probably get going." Lena nodded, though she didn't want him to. "Thank you for checking on me. And the cabinet." He smiled. Both seemed to be doing better. At the door, he hesitated. "Can I stop by again sometime just to make sure everything stays fixed?" Her heart fluttered. She kept her voice calm. "I'd like that." "Good," he said softly. "Then I will." He left, and once again the apartment fell quiet. But this time, the silence didn't feel lonely, felt full, like it carried something living inside it. Lena walked back into the kitchen, touching the cabinet door out of habit. It moved smoothly, silent, and steady. She smiled to herself. It wasn't the cabinet she was thinking about. Tit was the man who came to fix it, and the way his presence made her feel seen again. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't know what this was between them, or if it was even anything at all. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid of what might come next. She just felt awake. And though she didn't say it out loud, she knew she wanted him to come back, not because something in her home needed fixing, but because something in her heart had quietly begun to heal. The days that followed were quieter, but not empty. Lena found herself waking up with a strange lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. The air in her apartment felt warmer, her mornings calmer. She had started painting again, cooking proper meals, even humming while making coffee. Life wasn't perfect, but it no longer felt colorless. And though she wouldn't admit it out loud, she knew exactly who had brought that quiet change into her days. Evan had become a small but steady part of her life. Sometimes he would stop by under the excuse of checking the cabinet, even though both of them knew it didn't need any more fixing. Other times he'd text her about random things, a funny customer, a stubborn drawer, or the weather, and she'd find herself smiling at her phone like a teenager. Every visit felt natural. He'd help her fix a loose shelf or replace a bulb. And then they'd sit together over coffee or tea, talking about anything that came to mind. Their conversations grew deeper each time. He spoke about rebuilding his life after losing his wife, how he'd struggled to find meaning again. Lena shared how her own marriage had quietly crumbled, leaving her feeling invisible. There were no pitying words between them, only understanding to people who knew what it felt like to lose parts of themselves but were slowly learning to find warmth again. One evening, the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink as autumn started to settle in. Lena was sitting by the window, painting the fading sunset, when there was a familiar knock at her door. She smiled instantly, was the kind of smile that came easily now. When she opened the door, Evan stood there, his jacket slightly damp from a light drizzle. "I was nearby," he said with a small grin, "and thought I'd check on my favorite cabinet." Lena laughed. "It's still perfect, you know. I'll believe it when I see it," he replied playfully as he stepped inside. He set his tool bag down but didn't bother opening it. Instead, he looked around her apartment and noticed the half-finished painting on the easel. "That's beautiful," he said, walking closer. "You've been working on this?" She nodded. "I started again recently. I forgot how much I loved it." He looked at her with a proud smile. "That's good. Feels nice to remember the things that make you feel alive, doesn't it?" "It does," she said softly. For a moment, neither spoke. The room was quiet except for the faint sound of rain outside. Evan's gaze drifted toward her, and when their eyes met, it was the kind of look that didn't need words. It wasn't bold or heavy, it was gentle, full of understanding. He sat down and she joined him. Their talks came easily, like always. But there was something different in the air tonight, a stillness that wasn't uncomfortable. a closeness that asked for nothing but presence. After a while, Lena said quietly, "Do you ever get scared of being happy again? Like if you let yourself feel it, it'll just be taken away." Evan leaned back, thinking for a moment before answering. "Every day," he admitted. "After she passed, I didn't think I had the right to feel happy again. But then, one morning, I fixed an old rocking chair for a neighbor. She said it used to belong to her mother. And when she sat on it again, she cried. That's when I realized maybe happiness doesn't return all at once. It comes in small moments, little pieces. Sometimes it's not a big miracle. Sometimes it's just sitting across from someone who makes you feel at peace." Lena's throat tightened. His words felt like they were meant for her, and for a long second. She couldn't look away from him. She said softly, "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he replied, smiling faintly. "But it's worth trying." They both went quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of strangers. It was the kind of silence that feels safe. The kind where two people understand each other without needing to explain. Evan eventually reached across the table, his hand brushing against hers. The touch was small, almost hesitant, but it was enough. It wasn't about romance or passion, it was about connection. The kind that says, "I see you. I know you've been through pain, and I won't run from it." Lena didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hands so their fingers gently intertwined. She looked at him and whispered, "Maybe I needed fixing too." He smiled softly. "We all do sometimes." The rain outside grew steadier, tapping against the window like a quiet rhythm. They sat like that for a while, no big gestures, no dramatic words. Just warmth and calm in the middle of two lives that had seen enough heartbreak to appreciate the beauty of small peace. After a while, Evan stood up, walking toward the cabinet he'd fixed weeks ago. He opened and closed it, the hinges moving smoothly, soundless. "Still perfect," he said with a light grin. "Guess you did your job well," Lena teased. He turned toward her, his eyes kind but thoughtful. Maybe it wasn't just the cabinet that needed fixing. Her breath caught. She knew what he meant, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The look they shared said enough. When it was time for him to leave, he lingered by the door. "You know," he said quietly, "sometimes we don't realize how broken we've been until someone helps us feel whole again. You did that for me, Lena." She felt tears welling in her eyes. Not from sadness, but from something softer, something like gratitude. "You did the same for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, gentle, sincere. "Then I guess we both fixed something tonight." Before she could reply, he stepped forward and gave her a light, warm hug. It wasn't romantic or rushed, it was a quiet moment between two souls who had found comfort in each other's presence. When he pulled away, there was no need for more words. After he left, Lena stood by the window, watching the rain trail down the glass. Her heart felt calm, not lonely. The cabinet stood perfectly still, a silent reminder of where it all began. She walked over, ran her fingers along the smooth surface, and smiled. The wood was whole, solid. But more importantly, so was she. For years she'd believed healing came from time, from distance, from forgetting. But now she knew it came from connection, from kindness, understanding, and the courage to let someone in again. When she went to bed that night, her heart felt light. She didn't know what the future would bring, and that was okay. What mattered was that she no longer felt broken in the quiet glow of her small apartment. She whispered to herself, maybe everything can be fixed, with the right hands. Outside, the rain slowed, leaving behind the peaceful sound of dripping leaves. And somewhere in that stillness, Lena realized something beautiful. Sometimes people walk into your life to fix one small thing, but end up mending everything you didn't know was broken, and maybe, just maybe, that was love, not the kind that swept you away, but the kind that quietly put you back together.